walk us through how you got involved with the FDA and what is your role as a medical officer? What does that mean, and what do you do related to the FDA?
Absolutely. Maybe I'll take a little detour to get to that in terms of why did I have this idea, like what's interesting about it. And through the course of training, I started thinking about, well, what is the life cycle of a new idea? What is the life cycle of medical innovation? And I think we have all experienced some aspects of it, certainly as physicians or in general healthcare professionals. We have experienced the unmet need. We take care of patients every day. We see the good and the bad of medicine, and oftentimes we just face a barrier, something that cannot be done. And you may develop an idea. How do I fix this problem? That's just the start. I think most of us have experienced the next step, which is research. Well, I have an idea, I have an hypothesis, I want to test it, I'm going to get data, and I'm going to test my idea. And that's research, whether it's through clinical trials, observational research, meta-analysis, and so on. Well, what happens next? That idea remains an idea, even if it's published, but then how do you actually bring that to the patient, right? So next step is starting to interact with what I like to call enablers. So other entities that enable you to bring that to the patient. Important ones are funding entities, whether it's non-dilutive funding, so the NIH, foundations, which if they share your vision and it aligns with their agenda, they may support you to start creating your prototype, or dilutive funding, whether it's venture capital and so on. Next, you may start developing a product. That product you may start developing within your company, or you may rely on bigger companies that are then sharing their know-how, their distribution to make the product a reality as the results from your studies come back. But then, one is not creating like a new app or a new tennis racket that you can just put on the shelf and start selling, right? You are about to launch a new drug or device into human beings. So there needs to be an entity, a regulatory body, that needs to make sure that what you're doing is effective and safe. And that's where regulatory entities like the US FDA or the European Medicine Agency and so on come into place. And so as I started to understand this life cycle, I was very curious to understand, how do you make this decision? How do you evaluate something that's new? And oftentimes by being new, it means there is not a lot of data. You can't just say, oh, this is how it's gone up until now, therefore we'll follow this trend. Something, it's by definition new. And so how do you evaluate safety and effectiveness? And that's where these entities come into place. So the work at FDA has been incredibly stimulating. You are part of a multidisciplinary team, which includes you as a physician and the medical officer, but it may include veterinarians, as oftentimes the first studies are conducted in animals. It may include biomedical engineers who are very savvy with the construction of a device and its functioning, the biocompatibility, and so on. He may include regulatory experts, lawyers, biostatisticians, and they all come together.
Like a committee.
As a working group,
Okay.
to look at all the data that's available. And the data can become at different stages. It may be in-animal data used to support first-in-human data. First-in-human data needed to support a pivotal trial. So again, in the development of that device or that drug, each time there is a different level of contribution that you may be asked to give. But your job as a physician, as a person who has been in the front line, is to share your clinical understanding of that data and ultimately help to make that determination. Is this device or this drug effective and safe? We can go, of course, into more regulatory science, but in general, the idea is it truly brand new? And so it needs to be a pure pivotal trial. Or is there a precedent? Is there something similar enough that can be used as a benchmark? And so that then guides the decision-making process.
I'm sure devices and drugs try to go the second route, trying to say that they're similar to something that has already been improved.
That can be a strategy, but also depending on the level of risk, that may not be allowed. If something is very high risk or a category free, so oftentimes it's required to go through a pivotal trial. It's usually randomized. So it depends also on risk.
This is so unique and interesting. From an operational or logistical perspective, this committee or this working group, as you mentioned, you make recommendations, like is there a report, and then there's someone or like who makes that final decision, let's say.
Well, the individual members make recommendations. And it's truly a team sport because as a physician, you may be an expert in pathophysiology, but you may know nothing about animal models. That's why you have a veterinarian and so on. So each one weighs in. And at the end, this group makes, you can call it a recommendation, but it's effectively a
Decision. Gotcha.
whether something can enter the market or not.
That's incredible. How did you get into this, Enrico?
It was through this step-by-step exposure to the system, because as you conduct research, and I'm sure you may have this experience too, you may start interacting as a researcher with some ideas with the regulatory entity. And so those interactions made me curious to understand what's happening, how are these decisions being made. That fueled my curiosity to apply and then serve within the body.
You know, it's your story is so unique because you have this incredible uh, pedigree. Let's put it that way. Like you've trained at these best institutions. You've done great clinical training, HMS, Harvard Medical School, then Brigham and Women's, and then electrophysiology at Beth Israel. But you have such a diverse like research background and experiences internationally, population health, global health, and then outcomes research and the FDA. Where do you see your career going? Like with so much, with such a great training, and then also such unique experiences, and also a lot of them, a lot of different experiences. What comes next in your career?